The galaxy had known many rulers, but none as feared as the Dragon Emperor. He was not a man nor even close to human. His body was forged from starlight and ancient fire, his eyes holding the cold weight of 10,000 years. His warships, shaped like claws tearing through the void, had crushed empires, silenced rebellions, and turned thriving worlds into silent tombs. He ruled not with laws but with silence, the silence that followed the last scream of a dying civilization. For centuries, no one had dared challenge him. No one had even spoken his name without trembling. He had forgotten what it meant to feel anything but the steady hum of power and the emptiness that came after endless victory. Compassion was a word from a forgotten age, a weakness his kind had burned away long ago. Far from the heart of the empire, on the edge of charted space, a small human colony clung to life. It was called Viridia, a world of green hills, shallow seas, and skies streaked with the colors of a dying sun. The people there were not warriors or politicians. They were farmers, teachers, engineers, and children who still believed in bedtime stories. They knew nothing of the Dragon Emperor's wrath, only that their sun was fading and their world would soon freeze. The colony's power grid was failing. Solar flares from the unstable star played havoc with their systems. One evening, during a particularly violent storm, a young girl named Mira sat by her window watching the sky ripple with violet lightning. Her grandmother, Lena, held her close and began to hum a lullaby, a simple tune passed down through generations, about stars watching over lost travelers. Mira, sleepy and calm, joined in with a soft, clear voice. Unbeknownst to them, the colony's emergency broadcast tower had been damaged in the storm. Instead of sending out a standard distress signal, it picked up the lullaby and flung it into deep space, wrapped in a burst of raw subspace energy. It was not meant for anyone. It was just a song, fragile and fleeting. But space is vast, and sometimes the smallest things travel the farthest. Light years away, aboard the Obsidian Maw, the Dragon Emperor's flagship, the song arrived like a whisper in a tomb. The ship's sensors, designed to detect weapons fire, fleet movements, and coded threats, were baffled. This was none of those. It was music. Raw, unfiltered human music. The bridge crew, scaled and armored, stared at their screens in confusion. They had never heard anything like it. One of them, a young officer named Rel, hesitated before forwarding the signal to the throne chamber. Protocol demanded immediate deletion of unknown transmissions, but something in the melody made him pause. He pressed the key. Deep within the heart of the ship, the Dragon Emperor sat on a throne carved from the core of a dead planet. His eyes were closed, his mind adrift in memories of conquests long past. The lullaby reached him not as data, but as feeling. It slipped past his armor, past his centuries of rage, and touched something buried deep, a memory of a time before he was emperor, when he was just a hatchling under twin moons, listening to his mother's voice. His eyes opened. The chamber darkened as his presence stirred. The air grew heavy. His warlords, standing in silent rows, sensed the shift. None spoke. None dared. For a full minute, the Emperor said nothing. Then, in a voice like grinding stone, he spoke 2 words. "Find it." His command echoed through the ship. Navigation arrays spun, sensor nets stretched across the void. Within hours, they traced the signal's origin to a small, unremarkable world on the fringe of the Kessel Drift, Viridia. His generals expected orders to burn it, to erase the source of the strange, unsettling noise, but the Emperor gave no such command. Instead, he rose from his throne, his massive form casting shadows that swallowed the light. "Prepare the fleet," he said. "We go to Viridia." Confusion rippled through the command. Why waste fuel on a backwater world? Why not just destroy it from afar? But no one questioned him. To question the Dragon Emperor was to vanish. Days later, the Armada arrived. 10,000 warships, black as night, blotted out Viridia's sky. Alarms blared across the colony. People ran into shelters, clutching children and photos, bracing for fire from above. But the bombardment never came. Instead, the ship simply hovered, silent, watching. On the surface, panic turned to confusion. In the central plaza, Lena held Mira close, staring up at the impossible shapes in the sky. "They're not attacking," she whispered. "No," said Kyle, a quiet engineer who had lost his hearing in a mining accident years ago. He couldn't hear the alarms, but he felt the vibrations in the ground, the deep rhythmic pulses of engines holding position, not preparing to fire. They're waiting. High above, in the obsidian maw, the Emperor watched through a viewing pane that showed the entire planet below. His eyes fixed on a small building where the lullaby had originated. Sensors showed life signs, 2 humans, 1 old, 1 young. He zoomed in further, saw the girl's face, saw her lips move as she hummed the same tune again, even now, even with death hanging in the sky. Something inside him cracked. He remembered his own hatchling days, the warmth of his mother's wing, the songs she sang to calm his fears during meteor showers. He had buried those memories under layers of war, convinced they made him weak. But now, hearing that voice, so small, so brave, he wondered if he had been wrong. His second-in-command, General Vorak, stepped forward. His scales were scarred from 100 battles, his voice sharp with impatience. "My Emperor, this world is of no strategic value. Let me cleanse it. A single plasma strike, and it is done." The Emperor did not look at him. "No," Vorak stiffened. "They are primitive, unworthy of your attention." "They sang," the Emperor said simply. Vorak frowned. "Music is noise. Noise is weakness," the Emperor finally turned. His eyes glowed with an ancient fire. "Then perhaps I have been weak for 10,000 years, and only now remember what that means." He turned back to the viewport. Below, the humans were gathering in the open. No weapons, no shields. Just people standing together looking up. Some held hands, some wept, but none ran. "Hold position," the Emperor ordered. "Do not fire. Do not land, just watch." And so the fleet waited. On Viridia, hope flickered where fear had ruled. Elira, a former scientist who now taught history to children, stood among the crowd. She had heard the story of the lullaby being broadcast. She looked up at the silent armada and understood. They had not come to destroy. They had come to listen. She turned to Kale. "We have to show them we're more than just survivors." "We're people," Kale nodded. He couldn't hear her words, but he read her lips and felt the determination in her stance. He knew what she meant. That night, as the twin moons rose over Viridia, the colony did something no one expected. They began to sing. Not one song, but many, old hymns, work chants, love ballads, children's rhymes. Their voices rose into the cold air, carried by the wind, amplified by makeshift speakers, broadcast through every open channel. Aboard the obsidian maw, the Dragon Emperor listened. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he did not feel alone. The silence from the sky continued. The Dragon Emperor's fleet still hung above Viridia like a storm that refused to break. No weapons fired. No demands came. Just waiting. Watching. The people of Viridia, once frozen in fear, now moved with a strange new energy. They had sung into the void, and something had listened. Elira stood in the town square, her hands shaking not from cold but from purpose. She had spent years studying dead civilizations, how they rose, how they fell, what they left behind. Now she realized they had a chance to show a living one what humanity truly was, not through force but through sound. Through memory, through song. She gathered the colony's best musicians, poets, and even children who could carry a tune. Kale, though deaf, joined them not to hear but to feel. He placed his hands on the ground near the main speaker array, reading the vibrations like a language only he understood. He could tell when a note was true, when a rhythm held strength. His feedback helped shape their broadcasts. They began sending out more than just songs. They sent recordings of rain on rooftops, laughter in the market, the crackle of a cooking fire, the soft breathing of a sleeping baby. They sent stories, tales of kindness, of loss, of rebuilding after disaster. They did not beg for mercy. They simply said, "This is who we are." High above, aboard the obsidian maw, the Dragon Emperor received it all. His warlords grew restless. General Vorak paced the command deck like a caged beast. "This is madness," he growled. "We waste time listening to noise while our enemies gather strength elsewhere." The Emperor did not answer. He sat in his chamber, surrounded by floating screens showing every broadcast from Viridia. One screen played a video of an old man teaching a boy how to carve wood. Another showed a group of women planting seeds in a greenhouse, singing as they worked. A third held the image of Mira, the girl who had first sung the lullaby, now standing on a hill with her grandmother, arms raised to the sky as if greeting the fleet. Vorak slammed a clawed fist on the console. "They mock us. They think music can stop fire. They do not think at all, the Emperor said quietly. They simply are. That night something changed. The Emperor ordered a small probe launched, not armed, not scanning for weapons, but tuned to capture sound. It drifted down through Viridia's atmosphere and landed softly near the central plaza. Its single lens focused on Elira as she stood before a crowd, holding an old violin. She played a piece her mother had taught her, a melody about coming home after a long journey. The notes were simple, a little rough, but full of heart. The probe recorded every second. When it returned to the flagship, the Emperor played it again and again. In his mind, a door opened. Behind it lay memories he had sealed away, a time before the wars, before the throne, when his people gathered under starlit skies to share stories and songs of their own. They had not always been conquerors. Once they had been creators. Once they had known compassion, but remembering hurt. It made him feel small, weak, and weakness in his world meant death. Still, he could not silence the music. On Viridia, hope turned to action. People began repairing broken systems, sharing food, teaching each other skills. Fear had united them once. Now courage did. Even those who had doubted Elira's plan joined in. They built larger speakers powered by the colony's last working solar cells. They recorded choirs of 50 voices harmonizing under the fading sun. Kyle, meanwhile, discovered something strange. The colony's main reactor, a relic from Earth's last golden age, was behaving oddly. Its output fluctuated in time with the music broadcasts. He ran tests, checked connections, and found no mechanical fault. It was as if the machine itself was responding to the sound. He showed his findings to Elira. She didn't understand the science, but she understood the meaning. Maybe the universe listens too, she said. Above them the fleet remained. But something had shifted. A few of the smaller ships had dimmed their weapons arrays. The constant hum of targeting lasers had stopped. It was subtle, but the people of Viridia noticed. They sang louder. Then came the day the Emperor sent a message, not words, not threats, just a single tone, a deep, resonant note that vibrated through every speaker on Viridia. It lasted 10 seconds, then faded. The colony fell silent, unsure what it meant. Elira was the first to understand. "He's answering," she whispered. She stepped forward and played a matching note on her violin. A call-in response. Across the planet, people joined in, humming, whistling, tapping rhythms on metal pipes. The sound rose like a wave, clean and clear. In the throne chamber, the Emperor closed his eyes. For the first time in millennia, he felt something other than rage or duty. He felt connection, but not everyone shared his feeling. General Vorak stormed into the chamber without permission, his armor clanking. "Enough," he roared. "This ends now. I will not let sentiment rot our empire from within." The Emperor opened his eyes slowly. "You question my command?" "I question your mind," Vorak shot back. "You were once fire. Now you are smoke. These humans are nothing. Their songs are lies wrapped in pretty noise. They will use this moment to strike. They always do." The Emperor stood. His presence filled the room like a rising tide. "You speak of humans as if you know them, but you have never listened." "I listen to reason," Vorak snarled. "And reason says burn them." A tense silence followed. The other warlords watched, unmoving. None dared side with Vorak, but none spoke against him either. Finally, the Emperor spoke. "One more cycle. One more day. If they show me only noise, I will burn them myself. But if they show me truth, then perhaps the galaxy has been wrong about them, and about us." Vorak bowed stiffly, but his eyes burned with fury. He left, already planning. Back on Viridia, Elira knew time was running out. She called a meeting in the plaza. "They're giving us one more chance," she told the crowd. "Not to beg, not to fight, but to show them who we really are." Kale signed to her, his hands moving fast. "We don't need weapons. We need truth," she nodded. "Then we give them everything." That night, they prepared their final broadcast. Not just music, but raw, unfiltered life. They opened every camera, every microphone. They showed a mother feeding her child, a man fixing a broken fence, two friends arguing, then hugging, a funeral for an elder, followed by a celebration of her life. They showed pain, joy, mistakes, forgiveness, and at the center of it all, Mira stood again on the hill, this time alone. She held a small recorder, the same one that had first sent the lullaby into space. She pressed play. Her own voice, younger and softer, filled the air. the same lullaby, the one that started it all. As the song played, something unexpected happened. The glowing auroras above Viridia, caused by the dying sun's last flares, began to pulse in time with the melody. The sky itself seemed to sing. Aboard the obsidian maw, the Dragon Emperor watched. His claws, usually clenched in readiness for war, loosened. A single tear, hot as molten glass, traced a path down his scaled cheek. He did not wipe it away. He remembered his mother's voice. He remembered holding his first hatchling. He remembered a time when his people sang to the stars instead of burning them. Below, the people of Viridia waited. They did not know if they would live to see dawn, but they had spoken their truth. They had shown their hearts, and in the silent dark between worlds, the Dragon Emperor made his choice. The morning after the final broadcast, the sky above Viridia remained filled with warships, but the air felt different. Lighter, less like the edge of death, more like the edge of something new. The people gathered in the plaza, tired but hopeful. They had given everything. Now they waited, but not all shared their hope. Deep beneath the colony's surface, in a sealed maintenance tunnel, a group of men and women moved in silence. They wore gray coveralls and carried tools that could double as weapons. Their leader, Joran, had once been a security officer. He believed peace was a trap. To him, the Dragon Emperor's silence was not mercy. It was strategy, a trick to lower their guard before striking. "They think singing will save us," Joran muttered to his followers. But fire doesn't care about songs. He had spent weeks sabotaging the colony's core reactor, not to destroy it, but to make it fail slowly. A controlled collapse, enough to force an evacuation, enough to scatter the people into hidden bunkers. He believed survival meant hiding, not hoping. Now, with the fleet still watching, he activated the final sequence. A hidden switch clicked. Deep in the reactor's heart, a coolant valve sealed shut. Heat began to build. Alarms stayed silent. Joran had disabled them weeks ago. On the surface, Kale felt it first. He stood near the central power conduit, his bare feet on the metal grating. A low thrum, wrong in pitch and rhythm, vibrated through the ground. He frowned. This wasn't the music of life. This was the groan of something dying. He ran to the control hub, signing wildly to the techs on duty. They checked the screens. Everything looked normal. But Kyle insisted. He pointed to the reactor core, then mimed an explosion. Illyra arrived, breathless. She trusted Kale more than any machine. "Shut it down," she ordered. The techs hesitated. "There's no fault code." "If we shut it down, we lose heat, light, air filtration." "Do it," Illyra said. They flipped the emergency switch. The lights dimmed. The hum of life support systems faded to a whisper. Outside, the glowing tree, the one that had grown from the seed the Emperor's envoy left, flickered, its light dimming. Panic returned. People shouted. Children cried. Someone accused Illyra of causing the failure. Others blamed the fleet. In the chaos, Joran watched from the shadows, satisfied. Let them fear. Fear would drive them underground, where they'd be safe, from everything except the truth. High above, aboard the obsidian maw, the Emperor sensed the shift. His sensors showed Viridia's energy signature collapsing. His warlords stirred. "Now they show their true face," Vorik said, stepping forward. "They sabotage themselves to gain pity." "A classic human trick?" The Emperor said nothing. He replayed the last broadcast. The funeral, the lullaby, the auroras dancing to a child's voice. That was not the act of liars. He made a decision. Without warning, a single small vessel detached from the flagship. Sleek and silver, it descended through the clouds, ignoring all hails. It landed gently in the center of the plaza, kicking up dust but causing no damage. The hatch opened. Out stepped a figure in smooth, featureless armor. No weapons, no insignia. It carried only a small crystalline pod. The crowd backed away. Illyra stepped forward, hands open. The figure placed the pod on the ground, then knelt and pressed its palms to the soil. A soft light pulsed from the pod. Vines shot out, wrapping around the dying reactor conduit. Roots burrowed deep. Within minutes, the glowing tree, now twice its size, began to pulse with steady golden light. Power returned. The air warmed. The colony breathed again. The armored figure stood, gave a slow bow, and returned to its ship. It left without a word. Inside the reactor chamber, Kale and the engineers stared in awe. The new roots had stabilized the core, drawing off excess heat, purifying the coolant. It wasn't technology. It was life, alive and aware, but Joran saw only danger. "They're infecting us," he shouted to his group. "That thing is a weapon. It's changing our world." He tried to rally his people, but doubt had crept in. The tree saved them. The fleet did not attack. Maybe the songs were real. Still, Jorn refused to believe. That night, he planted explosives near the tree's base. If it was a weapon, it had to be destroyed. Meanwhile, aboard the flagship, tension boiled over. Vorak had had enough. He gathered loyal officers, those who still believed in fire over feeling. "The Emperor is lost," he told them. "He hears songs while the galaxy burns. We must act." They seized control of 3 dreadnoughts. Without orders, they powered up weapons. Targeting locks formed on Viridia's main settlement. On the surface, alarms finally blared. Not from the reactor, but from the sky. Red lights flashed. A voice crackled over every speaker. "Incoming fire. Seek shelter." Elira's heart sank. She looked up. 3 massive ships broke formation, their cannons glowing with deadly light. But the people did not run. Instead, they gathered around the glowing tree. Elira climbed onto a crate. "If this is our end," she called, "let them hear us one last time." She raised her violin. Kale activated the colony's sonic emitters. Others brought drums, flutes, even pots and pans. And Mira stood at the front, her small voice ready. As the dreadnoughts charged their weapons, Viridia began to sing. Not a lullaby this time. A song of defiance, of unity, of light in the dark. The music rose, amplified by the tree's energy, shooting into the sky like a shield made of sound. Aboard the lead rebel ship, Vorak sneered. Noise against plasma. Foolish to the end. He gave the order to fire, but the cannon sputtered. The targeting systems glitched. The harmonic waves from Viridia's song, tuned to the exact frequency of the ship's power cores, created feedback loops. Lights flickered. Engines stalled. Vorak roared in fury. "Override it! Fire manually!" Before he could, a massive shadow fell over his ship. The obsidian maw had moved. The Emperor's flagship now blocked the line of fire, its hull bristling with active shields. A voice boomed across all channels, not through speakers, but directly into the minds of every rebel soldier. It was the Emperor's voice, calm and final. "You will stand down, or you will burn." Vorak hesitated. He looked at the planet below, tiny, fragile, singing its heart out. He thought of his own past, of a time before endless war. He thought of the hatchlings he'd lost in a battle he no longer remembered the reason for. His hand trembled over the fire control. Then, slowly, he pulled back. The rebel ships powered down. On Viridia, the song did not stop. It grew stronger. People wept as they sang, not from fear but from relief, from pride. High above, the Dragon Emperor watched. He had stopped a war within his own ranks. He had protected a world that asked for nothing but to be heard. But he knew the danger wasn't over. Vorak would not forget this shame. Others would question his rule. The galaxy would not understand mercy. Still, as the last note of Viridia's song faded into the stars, the Emperor made a silent vow. He would not let them fall. Not while he still remembered what it meant to feel. The rebel ships withdrew, but the tension remained. Viridia's people knew they had been spared, not saved. The Dragon Emperor's fleet still filled their sky, and within it, enemies waited. General Vorak had not spoken since his failed attack, but his silence was louder than any threat. On the surface, life tried to return to normal. The glowing tree pulsed gently, its roots now woven into the colony's power grid, its light warming homes and calming fears. Children played beneath its branches. Farmers planted seeds in soil that now shimmered with faint energy. But beneath this peace, danger stirred. Joren had not given up. He watched the tree with narrowed eyes. To him it was not a gift, it was control, a way for the Emperor to bind them without chains. Late one night, he returned to the plaza with his last remaining followers. They carried cutting tools, acid canisters, and fear in their hearts. They never reached the tree. Kale was waiting. He had felt their approach through the ground, the sharp, angry vibrations of boots on metal, the clink of hidden tools. He stood alone in the plaza, arms crossed, face calm. Behind him, the tree glowed like a small sun. Joren stepped forward. "Move, Kale, this thing is poisoning us." Kale signed slowly, clearly. "It saved us. You tried to kill it." Joren's hand went to his belt. "I'm saving us from lies." Before he could act, lights flared around the plaza. Elira stood at the edge, flanked by dozens of colonists. Men, women, elders, even teenagers with tools of their own. They did not carry weapons. They carried shovels, wrenches, musical instruments. They formed a ring around the tree. "You don't get to decide for all of us," Elira said. Joran looked around. His followers hesitated. One by one, they lowered their tools. They had seen the tree heal the reactor. They had heard the songs that turned back warships. Maybe hope wasn't weakness. Joran spat on the ground and walked away, alone. But his sabotage had already done damage. Deep in the earth near the old reactor shaft, a hidden charge still ticked. He had set it days ago, a final failsafe. It would detonate at dawn. Kale sensed it too late. The vibration was faint, buried under layers of rock. He ran to Elira, signing frantically. She understood. They had less than an hour. There was no time to dig, no time to disarm it. But Kale had an idea. He led a team to the geothermal vents on the colony's eastern ridge, natural tunnels where heat from Viridia's core rose to the surface. Using spare parts and the tree's energy-conductive vines, he rigged a network of resonant chambers. If they could create the right frequency, they might redirect the blast upward, into the sky, instead of through the colony. Elira gathered the colony's best singers and musicians. "We need a sound that shakes the earth, but in a good way," she said. They practiced in the vents, voices echoing through stone. Kale placed his hands on the walls, adjusting pitch and rhythm until the ground hummed in harmony. It was risky. If they got it wrong, the blast could trigger a quake. But if they got it right, dawn came. The charge activated, a deep rumble shook the ground. People fell to their knees. The tree's light flared bright, then dimmed. But before the explosion could tear through the colony, the singers began. Their voices poured into the vents, amplified by Kale's system. The sound rose, not as noise, but as a wave of pure resonance. It met the blast underground and bent it, like a river around a stone. Steam and heat shot skyward in a harmless plume, visible even from orbit. On the obsidian maw, the Emperor watched the energy surge. His sensors showed no destruction, only music. He turned to his bridge crew. "What just happened?" A young officer, Rel, checked the data. They redirected an explosion. With sound. The Emperor was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Show me." Screens filled with footage from Viridia's cameras. He saw Kale, hands pressed to the earth, eyes closed in focus. He saw Elira leading the choir, sweat on her brow, voice raw but strong. He saw Mira standing beside the tree, arms outstretched as if holding the world together. And he saw something else. Unity. Not forced by fear, but chosen in courage. But Vorak saw only weakness. In the flagship's lower decks, he met with his loyalists. "The Emperor is blind," he hissed. "He lets children and singers decide our fate. If we do not act, the Empire will rot from within." This time, he would not ask for permission. He would take the throne. He planned his move for the next cycle. While the Emperor meditated in his chamber, Vorak would seize the command core, lock out loyalists, and broadcast a final order. Burn Viridia. Let the galaxy see that mercy ends in ruin. The night before the coup, the Emperor did something unexpected. He left his chamber and walked the ship's halls alone, unarmed. He passed through the crew quarters, the mess halls, the training decks. He saw young soldiers practicing drills, old engineers repairing circuits, medics tending to wounded from past battles. He stopped at a small room where Rel sat, listening to a recording from Viridia, a simple folk song about planting seeds. "Why do you listen to it?" the Emperor asked. Rel jumped, then bowed. "It reminds me of home, my Emperor." Before the wars, the Emperor nodded. "I had a home once too." He returned to his chamber, but he did not sleep. He thought of Vorak, of the Empire, of the girl who sang to the stars. He knew what was coming. The next day, as Vorak moved his forces into position, the Emperor made no move to stop him. He sat on his throne, eyes closed, as if waiting. Vorak entered the command core with 20 warriors. "It is over," he declared. "Step down or be removed." The Emperor opened his eyes. "You believe power is taken by force." "I know it is," Vorak growled. "Then take it," the Emperor said. He rose and stepped down from the throne. "But know this, when you sit there you will hear their songs, and you will wonder if you were wrong." Vorak scoffed and took the throne. He activated the main weapons array. "Target Viridia. Full plasma strike," the system beeped. "Error," he tried again. Same result. Rel stepped forward. The targeting codes have been locked, General. By your own biometric signature? From 10,000 years ago, Vorak froze. He looked at his claws. The system recognized him, not as a general, but as the young warrior he once was before rage hardened his heart. The Emperor spoke softly. The ship remembers who you were. Before you forgot, Vorak's hands shook. On the main screen, Viridia's people gathered again. Not in fear, but in song. This time it was a piece Elira had written. A melody about lost brothers finding their way home. Vorak heard it, and for the first time in centuries he remembered his own brother, fallen in a war over nothing. He lowered his head. The fight left his body. The Emperor approached, not as a ruler, but as an equal. He placed a hand on Vorak's shoulder. You do not have to be what the war made you. Vorak said nothing, but he did not resist as loyal guards led him away. On Viridia, the people kept singing. They did not know what had happened in the sky. They only knew they were still here, and as long as they had breath, they would use it to sing. The Dragon Emperor watched them, and for the first time he smiled. The sky above Viridia began to change. One by one, the warships turned away. Their black hulls caught the light of the dying sun, flashing like distant stars before vanishing into the deep. The people watched from the hills, from rooftops, from open fields, silent, unsure if this was truly the end or just another pause before the storm returned. But the Dragon Emperor's flagship remained. It hung alone now, a single shadow against the violet clouds. No weapons charged, no scanners probed. It simply stayed, as if guarding a secret too precious to leave behind. On the surface, life settled into a new rhythm. The glowing tree had grown taller, its branches spreading wide, its roots knitting through the soil like veins of light. Crops flourished in its glow. The air tasted cleaner. Even the fading sun seemed to burn a little brighter when its rays touched the leaves. Elira stood beneath it one morning, watching children play among the roots. She no longer carried her violin everywhere, but she still hummed as she walked. Kale sat nearby, hands resting on the warm ground, feeling the pulse of the colony, the steady beat of life, not fear. Mira ran up to them, holding a small fruit from the tree, its skin shimmering like dew. They're still there, she said, pointing to the sky. Yes, Elira replied, but they're not hurting us. Why? Elira looked up at the silent ship. Because they remembered something important. High above, aboard the Obsidian Maw, the Dragon Emperor prepared to leave. His warlords had been given new orders. Return to the core world, spread a new law. No world that sings shall be silenced. Vorak remained in quiet confinement, not as a prisoner, but as a student. He spent his days listening to recordings from Viridia, his old rage slowly softening into something like regret. The Emperor knew his presence could not last. The longer he stayed, the more his enemies would plot, the more Viridia would live in shadow. True peace meant freedom, not protection, but before he left, he had one final act. He stepped into a small shuttle alone. No guards, no armor, just his ancient form, scaled and scarred, carrying the weight of ages. The shuttle descended slowly, landing gently in the center of the plaza. The people gathered, not in fear, but in quiet awe. The hatch opened. The Dragon Emperor stepped out. He was taller than any building. His wings folded like storm clouds, his eyes holding the depth of galaxies. Yet he moved with care, placing each step as if afraid to crush a flower. The crowd parted, but no one ran. Even Joran stood at the edge, arms crossed, watching. Elira walked forward. She did not bow. She simply stood before him, small but unbroken. The Emperor looked down at her. Then, with surprising gentleness, he reached into a pouch at his side and pulled out a small object. A scale from his own chest, dark as night, but warm to the touch. It pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. He held it out. Elira took it. It hummed in her palm, sending a wave of calm through her body. You reminded me, the Emperor said, his voice low but clear, like stone rolling in a deep river, that even stars weep. He turned to Mira, who stood behind Elira, eyes wide. He knelt, slowly, carefully, until his massive head was level with hers. She did not flinch. Instead, she reached out and touched his snout, her small hand barely covering a single scale. You sang when you were afraid, he said to her. That is the bravest song of all. Then he rose. He looked at the tree, at the people, at the world that had dared to be kind in the face of annihilation. I will not return, he said, but I will remember. and others will hear your songs through me." He turned and walked back to his shuttle. As it lifted off, a single note echoed from its hull, a deep resonant tone that matched the lullaby Mira had first sung. The tree glowed brighter in response, its light spreading across the land. The shuttle joined the flagship. Together they turned toward the stars and vanished into the nebula. Silence returned to Viridia, but it was a different kind of silence. Not the silence of waiting for death, but the silence of peace earned. Days passed, weeks. The colony rebuilt not just its machines, but its spirit. They planted gardens under the tree's light. They taught their children to sing not just for joy, but for courage. They kept the recordings, the instruments, the memory of what they had done. And far away across the galaxy, something strange began to happen. On worlds long crushed under the Emperor's rule, people started to whisper, then hum, then sing. A farmer on a dust-choked moon sang a work song his grandmother taught him. A prisoner in a mining camp tapped a rhythm on his chains. A child on a frozen outpost played a broken flute. Their songs were weak at first, hidden in corners, afraid of being heard. But then they noticed something. The patrols changed. The warships no longer fired on signals. Sometimes they even paused and listened. The Dragon Emperor had not just spared Viridia. He had planted a seed in the heart of the Empire, and seeds once planted have a way of growing. Back on Viridia, Elira stood on the hill at sunset, the Emperor's scale warm in her hand. Kyle joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Mira ran up, breathless, holding a new song she had written. "What do we do now?" Mira asked. Elira smiled. "We keep singing." And so they did, not because they were safe, but because they knew their voices mattered. Because somewhere in the dark between stars, a being older than time had heard them and remembered how to feel. The galaxy would never be the same. Not because of weapons or empires, but because of a lullaby, a tree, and the quiet courage of those who chose song over silence. And high above, in the endless night, the stars themselves seemed to hum along.